thank both of you for being here, and thank you so much for everything you've done for the country. I wanted to follow up on your comments, Dr. Brzezinski. I found them very interesting about Putin, and that, in fact, you were concerned about some of the statements that have been overlooked that he has made that have referenced nuclear weapons, and including some of the overflights that Russia has undertaken in Scandinavia, West Portugal, other areas. So I wanted to follow up in light of the potential and I think actual violation of the INF Treaty that we've seen, that I know, General Scowcroft, that you have also written about as well. In fact, I think, General, you wrote in an op-ed in August of 2014 that this should be a real concern to NATO because they have embarked on an across-the-board modernization of their nuclear forces. And of course, if Russia has developed a nuclear ground-launched cruise missile in violation of the 1987 INF Treaty, that type of system could virtually reach all of NATO Europe. So how do you view, both of you, the idea of the violation of this treaty in light of where we are right now and some of the statements that you've heard Putin made? What should our concern be about that? And thinking about, I appreciated your comments, Dr. Brzezinski, that we have to show commitment and determination to Putin, and that will hopefully cause him to stop being so escalatory with what he's doing with Ukraine and also this treaty. So I'd like to get both of your thoughts on this violation, what it means for their nuclear programs, our interactions with them.
Well, I don't think he will go all the way in violating the nuclear treaty. I'm more concerned about his misinterpreting what has happened recently. Let's go back a little more than a year. I wonder how many people in this room or on this very important senatorial committee really anticipated that one day Putin would land military personnel in Crimea and seize it. I think if anybody said that's what he's going to do, he or she would be labeled as a warmonger. He did it, and he got away with it. Right. I think he's also drawing lessons from that. And I'll tell you what my horror night dream is. That one day, and I literally mean one day, he just seizes Riga and Tallinn, Latvia and Estonia. It would literally take him one day. There's no way they could resist. And then we'll say how horrible, how shocking, how outrageous. But of course we can't do anything about it. It's happened. We're not going to assemble a fleet in the Baltic and then engage in amphibious landings and then storm ashore like in Normandy to take it back. We'll have to respond in some larger fashion perhaps, but then there will be voices, well, but this will plunge us into a nuclear war. Yeah, I think deterrence has to have meaning. It has to have teeth in it. And it has to create a situation in which someone planning an action like that has no choice but to anticipate what kind of resistance will I encounter. And this is why I recommend what I do recommend. Pre-positioning of some forces, limited so it's not provocative. You know, an American company in Estonia is not going to invade Russia. Mm-hmm. And Putin will know that. But he will know that if he invades Estonia, he will encounter some American forces on the ground, and better still, some Germans, some French, so Brits, of course. I think if we do that kind of stuff, we are consolidating stability, including nuclear one. And the same goes for the ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine. I don't think Putin plans to invade Ukraine as a whole, because that would be too dangerous, and you cannot simply predict what will happen. But this continuous pinpricking can involve some escalation. It has already involved escalation. There are Russians, at least in the hundreds, according to some NATO accounts, in terms of several thousand, fighting within Ukraine against an established country. This is something that cannot be ignored. So economic sanctions, yes, in the long run, they create an attitude, a concern in Russian society, which will deprive Putin of his popular support. And this ecstatic sense, we have become a superpower again. But in the short run, we have to deal also with his motivations. And the only way to do that is to indicate to him by tangible steps, such as defensive arming of the Ukrainians, that we will be involved in some fashion in making that military engagement more costly. And at the same time, to indicate to him that we're prepared to settle, send him a signal about non-NATO participation for Ukraine. That, to me, is a strategy of responding to the possibility that you very rightly raise.
And without taking those steps, obviously, as I hear you saying, that you believe the economic sanctions alone will not deter him.
I'm afraid that the economic sanctions alone will damage in the meantime because of what he has a free hand in doing, Ukraine than Russia. There is a kind of an implicit race as which economy will collapse first. And the Ukrainian government is still not in full control of its entire society. It is putting together rapidly a makeshift army, and it's getting very little support in that regard from the outside. I'm not suggesting that the Ukrainians be armed to wage an offensive war against the Russians. But I do urge that we do something to make Putin ask himself before he escalates, am I going to be in something much bigger than so far? And what will that do to me? That's all that's involved, but it's essential.
Thank you.